advised government on a range of different issues, reflecting his common sense and grounded approach, which I think is very important. I missed his talk at our recent security conference, unfortunately, but I think some of those issues he might be expanding on tonight. And security is something I think that's very prevalent in all our minds for so many different reasons, from cyber security right through a range of other contexts and situations. Certainly, as someone involved in writing the institutional prevent strategy, it's something we think about, and I think it's great really to have this kind of event which raises some of the issues and concerns and really focuses our need for freedom of speech alongside responsibilities for ensuring safety and security of everyone. I'm not going to say much more because I think I will leave it to Lord Carlile, and then there will be an opportunity for questions, which will be led by Michael. So just thank you very much, and we're delighted to have you here.
Thank you very much. Provost, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for turning out in such large numbers today. My faith in universities is reinvigorated. In my day, it was always considered worth listening to a lecturer for up to a maximum of 1 hour if there was free drink available at the end. I'm glad to see that that tradition still holds in this distinguished school of management. And I shall keep you from your free drink and twiglets and nuts and the Coca-Cola for not one moment longer than is decent. I'm going to start slightly dangerously, because I understand that there's something recording me over there, by letting you into a little known secret about myself. I have an exercise bike, and every morning I sit on my exercise bike for 20 minutes. Well, I don't just sit on it, I exercise on my exercise bike for 20 minutes whilst watching BBC Breakfast, which is presented by a number of people I know, including somebody who was my research assistant at one time, John Kay. And why do I do it? And I often ask myself, why am I doing this at 6:20 in the morning, which is usually when I get onto it? It's because I'm doing something that I can't really measure, but I'm trying to be a reasonably healthy man of my age, which you can look up if you really want to, who can still enjoy the rich and exotic food, which I love, and the occasional bottle of wine, whilst not becoming so unhealthy that it will shorten my life. So I'm balancing with bad things the exercise, which in broad terms is a good thing. And why am I telling you about my exercise bike? Because actually controlling, reviewing, making, understanding counter-terrorism law is very like that simple example I've given. It's not science, it's art. It's trying to balance things that you cannot completely define against one another. And the most important part of what those of us who've taken part over many years in the making of counter-terrorism law and policy do is to try and balance the civil liberties on the one hand and the rule of law on the other. Now, there's an awful lot of publicity, and there are many claims these days that the state is more intrusive than it should be, that the state is invading our privacy in unacceptable ways. There is a theory about that there are malevolent civil servants who are hoovering up vast quantities of the internet, and because they've got nothing much to do, they look at Alex Carlile on the internet, that's me, they look at Alex Carlile on the internet and have a look what books I've bought from Amazon. or what groceries I've purchased from wherever we purchase our groceries. And they're so idle that they just do things like that flow into their minds. Of course, the truth is very different. The protection of national security is a very important piece of non-violent combat. And achieving the balance is partly done by those people. Who is really responsible for the breaches of privacy? Is it the state or not? Well, what I would like to suggest to you is that we, and I am one of the many we, have given away our privacy to the private sector over the years, and we do not realise how much we have given away. Recently, I had a demonstration of a website called EchoSec. EchoSec is a very respectable business startup that has had some grants given to it to establish itself as a small business in South Wales. It's been established by some mathematicians and computer scientists, and their audience is, for example, banks who pay them a subscription. You will, I'm sure, there will be many of you, perhaps all of you, who subscribe either to Facebook or Twitter or some other social media site. The way EchoSec works is like this. You put in a person's, for example, Facebook identity, and within 7 seconds, there appears on the screen a map of the world. And it shows where the individual whose identity you've entered has used Facebook in the last 7 months. So the example I was shown had about 50 or 60 little flags in various parts of the world. So supposing you're interested in what that person was up to in Beirut on the 7th of July, where there is a flag. You click on that flag for Beirut on the 7th of July, and hey presto, in much less than 7 seconds, up comes the entire content of that individual's Facebook postings whilst they were in Beirut. Now that's not, and it applies to anyone, anywhere, provided you've got that basic information. It's not the state doing it. It's done under Facebook's, what they call their privacy policy. But actually the reality of their privacy policy is that it's a dispersal policy, which enables them to, if you read the small print, how many people here, and I'm not one of them, have actually read the small print on Facebook's privacy policy? Now, I don't think I know any lawyer, except possibly the person who wrote it, who has ever read Facebook's privacy policy. If you say you buy your groceries from Tesco online and they deliver them to your house. If you put in your Christmas reservation, your slot reservation in, say, early November, so you get your big delivery on the 23rd or the 24th of December, what comes up is a list of what you bought in your Christmas order in the previous 2 years. So they know exactly what you eat at Christmas, and they suggest that they've got some wonderful new things, which may possibly cost a little more, that you might want to use in the forthcoming Christmas. The way I put it is, the private sector knows everything, right down to our shoe sizes. So what has happened in reality is that 90-something% of the private information that is on the internet about each of us has been given and retained by the private sector. Now you may say, of course the difference is that's voluntary and the state is doing it compulsorily. But is it really voluntary? When I buy Charles Moore's, I'll give you a real example, biography of Margaret Thatcher's 2nd edition, as I did, from Amazon recently, do I really want them to be telling me what I bought recently and how I might quite be interested in Tim Ross's history of the 2015 general election? What business is it of theirs? But that is the reality of what has happened. And I think it's very important to say that, because when we're looking at the balance, we need to bear in mind how much we've given away. A great and now sadly deceased professor of terrorism issues, Professor Paul Wilkinson of St Andrews University, told me the first time I met him in 2001 that 95% of so-called secret material is available in open sources, provided you know where to look. And is this problem going to get bigger or smaller? In 2015, last year, internet traffic amounted to 966 exabytes. I don't know what an exabyte is quite, but it's a lot. And that was the equivalent last year of 15.1 billion 64 gigabyte iPads, 2015. There's a new measure, it's called zettabytes. Now, zettabytes have 21 noughts, right? 21 noughts after a 1. In 2019, it is estimated that there will be 2 zettabytes of information on the internet, much of it available to anyone who wishes to access it. 2 zettabytes are the equivalent of 31.25 billion 64 gigabyte iPads. Or to put it in simple terms, it's enough for each person in the world in 2019 to have 4 64 gigabyte iPads. That's the amount of information that we will be looking at. And the reason I mention those figures is that this exponential growth of the internet has brought with it really significant challenges to governments worldwide. It's brought huge benefits. For example, if you are a dissident living in Iran at the present time and you're prepared to take small risks, relatively small risks, then the internet is a tool for freedom of speech, which can be used particularly through protected websites to talk to your friends and supporters elsewhere in the world, and indeed talk to one another to understand the level of opposition. But alongside the benefits, the exponential growth of the internet has created really significant challenges for national governments whose first job is to protect their citizens. And it's notable that today these discussions are dominated by freedom of speech and privacy, and also the issue of encryption. What I've come here to talk about today in the next 20-25 minutes or so before we have questions is that challenge presented by the growth of the internet, rights of privacy, and the role of the state. If we wish to enjoy our daily freedoms, there are certain conditions that we must agree to. It used to be called, sometimes still is, the social contract. It's about what is lawful and what is unlawful. It may be fun to steal, but we're not allowed to steal because it's counter excuse me, it's counter to a peaceful society. The same sort of simple philosophical issues apply to the internet. It's created a platform through which people can express themselves more or less freely. I was telephoned in the car on my way down here from central London this evening by a man who's written a novel about wind farms, on-land wind farms, which is a subject that happens to interest me because I used to be a Welsh rural MP. And he can't find anyone to publish it, unsurprisingly. So he's going to publish it on the internet, and I fear I may have to read it as a result of his approaching me. That's an opportunity that didn't exist for other people. In autocratic countries, and I mentioned one, Iran, but it could, if I can be slightly controversial, apply equally to Egypt, Libya insofar as